When Laesgaw K'Chawtee was in high school in Buffalo, New York, some friends invited him to Education Week at BYU.
So yeah, I'm down to go to road trip to go to BYU's Education Week.
Little did he know just how much that week would change his life.
I remember the first thing I saw when I came to Education Week was come in to learn, go forth to serve. That really clicked with me. It's music to my ear, and I heard that. So on the way back to Buffalo, I literally, in the car, I looked at my friends like, did you guys feel that? Like, hey, something warm, something peaceful. This is really nice. They looked at me. That was the spirit. I was like, oh, okay. So how do I join your church?
Welcome to the Why Magazine podcast, bringing you ideas, stories, and voices from Brigham Young University. My name is Whitney Archibald, and today we're talking to Laesgaw K'Chawtee, a current BYU student in international relations, about his journey from novice monk to missionary, from refugee to one of the few BYU undergrads to teach a 300-level class. Here to help K'Chawtee tell his story is Coleman S, a student intern at Why Magazine who first met K'Chawtee on their mission in Kentucky and then became his roommate when they returned to BYU.
So K'Chawtee, I want to learn more about your personal story, how you went from a refugee camp in Thailand to Buffalo, New York, and eventually ended up at BYU. But first, tell us a little bit about the history of your people, broad strokes.
Yeah, for sure. The Karen people, we call ourselves Kenya or Plum in a different dialect. We live in Southeast Asia, in a country called Burma or Myanmar, the southern part of it mostly. We've lived there for thousands of years. And the Karen people are very simple. We live in the plains and in the mountains, right, in the hills. We're called the hill people sometimes. After 1948, after the independence from Great Britain, the Burmese started killing the Karen people, plundering our villages and just committing crimes against humanity, just all kinds of atrocities that you can imagine. But essentially, they want us off the map. As a response, we declared war to succeed from the Union. Our goal is to be free, to be self-autonomous, and to have a country of our own. And we call that Kotule, which means the land that is without evil. So yeah, that's the conflict. My dad was involved in that when he was like 12.
Wow.
He became a child soldier, right?
Yeah.
But he had to defend his homeland. He never had a childhood, right? He probably grew up thinking that was normal.
Yeah.
But that's all he knew. But for me, like I grew up in the States. I was born in the refugee camps, in Thai refugee camp. And I thought that was normal. Mm. I didn't know that life was hard or peculiar in the sense that it's sad until I came to the States and I have something better to compare it to. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's hard to wrap your minds around that something like that exists out there, like a war.
That's really a fascinating perspective. Well, tell me a little bit about, growing up in Thailand. What are some early vivid memories you have of your childhood?
My favorite memory of Thailand when I was there, I was just running in the rain. Like when the monsoon season, the rain came, you're just running. There's rain and there's mud. I'm just a kid, right? Like I don't understand anything that's really going on. Right? My parents are the one struggling to make ends meet, to find food for us and all that. I had no idea. Yeah, it took me a long time being here in the U.S. and thinking back and having other people ask me what it was like.
Right.
That, then it made me think a little bit. But then that was my favorite memory, just being a kid, being there, just having fun.
When did you move to the States?
It was 2008. Moved to Buffalo, New York.
That must have been quite the transition.
It was very different. That was my first time seeing snow.
Wow.
So it was wild. It was really, really cold.
Was that a difficult transition for your parents?
The transition itself must have been difficult, but I think even the decision to come is even more difficult, right? My parents weren't on the same page at first. My dad was ready to go. He's like, let's get these kids some education. Mm. He heard about America. He heard about another country, right? The Western countries. He doesn't know what they are or where they are, but he knows that it's just better. So he's ready. But when I think about my mom's reluctance to come, I think about if I were in their shoe, right? Like, let's say you ran away from war and now you're in this refugee camp. You may have lost family. And so these new friends that you met, now they're your family. You've lived with them for maybe a decade or two. And you're also sacrificing those relationships when you move out.
Yeah.
So that decision must have been hard. But the transitioning after that decision, I mean, as a kid, it was easy for me. But for my parents, now they're in a different country with a different language, with an actual legal system, right?
So you enrolled in school. Obviously, a lot of what's brought you where you are is your involvement with the Church of Jesus Christ. And we're going to get to how you ended up running into the church, but I want to backtrack a little and ask about religion. When you were younger, when you were growing up in Thailand, did you have a sense of connection to deity, to faith at all? What role did that play in your family?
Yeah, so my family is actually Buddhist, right? I was raised as a Buddhist. I was actually a novice monk in Thailand and once more in New York. But in terms of deity, I've always felt that there is deity, but I could never explain it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you came to Buffalo. How long was it before you met members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
It was in high school, and they weren't even members then. My two best friends, Mark and Jack, they were introduced to the church by one of our friend named Kumbi, right? He was introduced to the church, and then they met at their elementary school. Kumbi introduced the twins, Mark and Jack are twins, to the church. And then the twins introduced me to the church in the way of Boy Scouting, like Boy Scouts. So I was really down. They got me sold when they said we were going camping. And they tried to get me to go to church, but I really refused for like 2.5 years. Was not interested, right? But I did spend a lot of time with these guys. And I did know that these saints in Buffalo, they believe what they preach, and they are living what they're preaching. That's what I was like, okay, I'll give them that. And then later down the line, when it came time for deciding which college to go to, all the young men leaders went to BYU. So they introduced me to BYU. We went to an education week.
Oh.
So interestingly, my first time going to a church, to a word on Sunday, was actually in Colorado. Isn't that weird? It's like miles away from where they introduced me about the church.
So that was on the way to Education Week?
Yeah, it was on the way to Education Week.
So what got you to Education Week?
It's just college. All the men I respected at this point were all members of the church.
Right.
And they all went to BYU. That was the one thing common in them. Yeah, I saw how they treated their wives and how their families were treating each other. I didn't realize it was a gospel then. But I knew these men knew exactly where I needed to go if I wanted to become a little bit of what they have.
Okay.
Right. So I went along with it. So yeah, I'm down to go to road trip to go to BYU's Education Week. So yeah, on the way, and we went to church because they weren't going to miss church, right?
Right.
It's a Sunday, I'm going to church. Like, well, yeah,
they do.
But at this point, I guess I got to go too.
Huh. What did you think of that first sacrament meeting?
I had no idea what was going on. But it was actually fast and testimony week. And this lady just bore her testimony. I have no idea what she said, but she was crying. And it actually made me curious, right? Like, how can one person feel this kind of emotional connection to this level where tears are coming out of her eyes, and yet she has never seen God herself, right? Like, it didn't make sense to me, but that piqued my interest. Then I went to Education Week. It was Elder Holland, and he quoted from 2 Nephi 2:25, right? Adam felt that men might be, and men are that they might have joy. It's such a common one too, right?
Yeah.
But for me, I've never heard that. But when I heard it, I was like, that's facts right there.
That is true.
I know a little bit of who Adam is and Eve is, but that statement, somehow in my body, I knew that it was true. I received some kind of confirmation that quote that he was saying was true. And so that opened my heart and my ears the rest of Education Week. So I took it very seriously and just try to enjoy my time and be open about things. So I felt the Spirit really strong. I learned to recognize that as the Spirit now. So on the way back to Buffalo, I literally, in the car, I looked at my friends did you guys feel that? Hey, something warm, something peaceful. It's just really nice. They looked at me. That was the spirit. I was like, oh, okay. So how do I join your church? I think about a month and a half later, I was baptized.
So how long after you were baptized did you decide to go on a mission?
Interestingly, the young men leaders are very good missionaries. They always talk about their mission. So I've always been curious since my time as a young man. So they would share special thoughts, and they stick sometimes. But after I got baptized, it was about a year, because you need to wait at least a year to go anyway. So I decided to come to BYU for 2 semesters, and I felt this immense pressure that there's a work waiting for me to do. I was originally called Spanish speaking. I was supposed to teach Hispanics in Kentucky. So I learned Spanish in Mexico, came back and did that for maybe 2 transfers. And then there's Karen people there.
Yeah. And
the rest of my mission was just that, teaching Quran to the sisters and to my companion. He spoke 0 Quran. Didn't know what that was. He did not know what it was until the day he came to the mission home. Mission president's like, hey, you want to learn Quran? But that mission was everything to me.
So one of the things that was, as a bystander, for me as a missionary in the same mission, that was really significant was you performed the first baptism in the Korean language.
I'm not sure if I was the very first person. Maybe I was. I don't know. How do you know this thing, right?
Right.
But I was definitely the first one in Kentucky. To baptize in the Korean language. It's the Lord's work. It was so new, so we required so many prayers, so many questions. How do we do this? And it was just a lot of relying on God.
Mm-hmm. So you come back from your mission, having spent almost all of it teaching your people the gospel, serving them there. What happened after that? You went to BYU, became my roommate.
Yeah. Instead of going home to New York, I decided if I could go to the Korean branch. Because, I've been teaching Korean this whole time on my mission, but there's no branch, right? It's just the American ward, a family ward. I'm so curious now because of my mission to see people of the same faith of my ethnic identity. I'm just so excited to come see. So I came to the branch, and that's actually where I met my wife. She came my homecoming talk. She definitely came for the food, right? Because we always have food when things like that happen, especially the Korean branch. And she came and we talked, and we're married now, and we're expecting a kid in December. Thanks. It's a boy.
It's exciting. Oh man. So when did you have the idea or have the thought that you'd teach a class to return missionaries?
For the international relation major, one of the requirements is you're supposed to learn a language to a 300 level. And I'm I already speak 2 dialects of Quran to mastery. I've translated, I've taught other missionaries this language. I don't want to take more classes, right? Waste time. So I wanted to get that waived. But when I went to the program director, he was like, well, what are some proofs, some credentials that, I can cross off? You have a certificate, you have this. Well, not quite. Yeah. Right. Nobody's teaching Quran where you can go and pass it off anyway. So, but it was well, students have done this in the past, but if you can teach it, you won't get credit for it, but we can waive it for you. Now, at this point, I was working with MTC, translating some church basic material with some friends for the Embark app. And so, I think that helped BYU make that decision. And so that began the journey of teaching the class. And it's the first of its kind, in the Korean language at BYU. So there were so many challenges. There was many setbacks. I was making I felt like I was taking a 12-credit class, preparing for that class all the time.
What was the structure and kind of philosophy behind the class?
So we started with all the cool and fun traditions, right? We started with marriages, families, and all these great traditions. Wrist tying, we talked about them, what they mean. And they were just loving it, right? Yeah. And then in the middle, we talked about colonization. So it got a little darker.
Right.
And then at the very end, we talked about genocide. So the class ended on a very dark note. But that's the reality.
Right.
That's the reality and the experience of my people. And so now they understand maybe a little taste of what that might feel like.
That loss.
Yeah, that exactly, that sense of loss. And they already love the people from serving the mission, but I think the class helped them understand more about the people they already love, like what they're going through, maybe the traumas and the decisions that they have to make.
Yeah, what struck me interviewing some of your students is all of them, every single one of them, seems deeply committed to that continuing service. And I'm sure that other missionaries that served in other parts of the world, all over, feel similarly, but there is something distinct about, just how far many of them have taken that feeling. They've done, like you're saying, translation work. They've spent hundreds of hours developing training curriculum. What do you think is motivating them and motivating you?
Bottom line is charity. I think it's just love for the people. For those who have served missions, we know how much love we can have for strangers. Right? We learn how to love strangers. And for a Karen mission, I think it's even more unique in the sense that you're usually in one area, your whole mission.
Yeah.
So you get really close to the people you teach. You really get to see their progression. You get really invested in their personal lives and their stories. So that when you hear about the genocide, it's not just a distant idea. You can put faces to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that level of connection, it helps with motivating themselves to continue to serve. And I thoroughly believe if you're called to serve, you're called to serve those people, maybe for the rest of your lives.
And so the class was a way to remind them of that, help them understand more deeply the people that they had been able to serve.
Yeah, I try to help them with language, right? It's a language class,
yeah.
But I really wanted them to understand the history, the context of the people that they're serving, and try to have them discuss on what their ideas are, how we can help the people here. What are some challenges that they're facing?
Overall, how would you say BYU has changed your life mission?
So being at BYU is amazing. Right? All these students inspire me to continue to serve. I want to serve with them. It's like a community of servers. Right? We want to serve. When you really think about it, that Korean class served no purpose in terms of practicality for their respective careers.
Yeah.
What are you going to do with Korean? Nobody speaks it besides, a few refugees. For career-wise, it's not like that great of an advantage to learn it.
Right.
But here, yet they give their time to learn, to understand. It's because they want to serve. So this community of service-minded people has really helped me want to and motivate me to continue to serve.
How do you see yourself fulfilling your mission, knowing you have there's a spiritual component, but you also have this strong sense of duty to your people?
Doctrine and Covenants, section 123, verse 12, says, they're only kept from the truth because they know not where to find them. That is really serious. Not a warning, but a statement, right? Because that's true for a lot of people, and especially true among the Quran people. They have no idea who we are. There's a lot of misinformation in the Quran language about the church. This is crazy to me. It's I barely find out what this church is about. There's already anti-church material in my language. That is driving me nuts. In terms of continuing to serve, that doesn't deter anything. And in fact, that just inspires me to serve more. Right? The covenant is to bless the world, right? So let's bless them.
Yeah.
And that's all it is. I'm having joy by serving my people. You might not even have to introduce the gospel, but you just live it, and they'll see. Just kind of like the Buffalo Saints.
Right.
They just live it, and I saw. I like what I saw, and I asked them how to get that, and they led me to Christ. I think that's what it's going to look like for me, is just continuing to serve my people in any way I can.
Thank you for listening to the Y Magazine podcast. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe and tell your friends so we can grow. Special thanks to Coleman Numbers for conducting the interview and assisting with production on this episode. Coleman also wrote the article this episode was based on, called For Life, in the fall 2023 issue of Y Magazine. Additional production by me, Whitney Archibald. Executive producer Denya Palmer. Original music plus mixing and mastering by Jarrett Davis.